Then it will happen suddenly. A day, 2 days, a week at the most.
A day? 2 days?
There's nothing that can be done now.
It sounds crazy, Keys, but it's true, so help me. I couldn't hear my own footsteps. It was the walk of a dead man.
There often comes a pivotal scene in film noir when the protagonist realizes that they are completely and utterly doomed.
This is a case for homicide.
Homicide?
I don't think you fully understand, Bigelow. You've been murdered.
This is the moment of existential crisis. In film noir, the cataclysmic event that befalls the protagonist typically comes at the beginning or middle of the film. Such is the case for Frank Bigelow, who learns he has been poisoned and only has days left to live.
Maybe it's not as bad as you think, Doctor.
That's characteristic.
While Bigelow is perhaps one of the more extreme examples of an ill-fated protagonist facing certain death, the desire to fight against an inevitable outcome is a common thread across many classic noir films. We see this in Double Indemnity, with Walter Neff, in the retrospective narration of the crime he committed.
There was nothing to give us away. And yet, Keys, as I was walking down the street to the drugstore, suddenly it came over me that everything would go wrong.
We see it again in the opening scene of The Big Clock with George Stroud.
I'm no criminal. What happened? When did it all start?
While the moment of existential dread can be captured in narration, like in Double Indemnity and The Big Clock, other films such as DOA and Stranger on the Third Floor capture this moment by facial expression.
Why did you do it? Speak up! Why did you kill him? Come on, come clean. Confess and we'll go easy on you. I didn't. Stop lying. You know you're killing. I didn't. The stranger did it. The man I saw in the hall. Where'd you hide the gun? I never had a gun. Where did you put the knife? What knife? This one. Ah, you thought we wouldn't find it, eh? I didn't kill him. I didn't.
It is clear that moments of existential dread and crisis pervade film noir. But why do they tend to happen in the first half of the film? Why not wait until the very end and have the whole thing blow up in your face, like in Kiss Me Deadly? The key element is timing. Film noir is closely tied with existentialism, and once you understand the pattern, it's easy to connect the dots between existentialist literature and the noir protagonist. To borrow a line from French philosopher Albert Camus in The Myth of Sisyphus, quote, "Man stands face to face with the irrational. He feels within him his longing for happiness and for reason. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world." In terms of noir, the irrational is the world that these characters live in, a world where there are no inherent truths to be discovered, no way of escaping. This desire for reason is what gets our protagonist in trouble, whether it be longing for a person, like Walter Neff for Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity, longing for answers, like Frank Bigelow in DOA, or longing for self-preservation, like Franz Kindler in The Stranger. It is between these 2 points, the irrational and the longing, where the noir protagonist is born. The noir protagonist is both aware of the irrationality of the world, yet continues to engage in a futile struggle of false hope. In order to be truly existential, the protagonist must realize this position that they are trapped in, and choose to carry on despite knowing that there is no hope. In DOA, Frank Bigelow is a deeply existential character, because he knows he is going to die. DOA would not be an existential film had Bigelow believed he was going to live until the very end. Death is not a question of if for Bigelow and the audience, but rather a question of when. Horror films of the 50s and 60s function in a similar way. You know people are going to die. It is just a question of who and how many. The moment of crisis that film noir reserves for the first half of the film is placed almost exclusively at the end in horror films. The crisis can take the form of a sudden realization after the fact of the crime that's been committed. We see this at the end of the 1958 horror film I Bury the Living, with character Andy McGee.
They could all be back. They could all be back. Stop.
This crisis could also come as a twist of fortune, like Ben's fate at the end of Night of the Living Dead, or Christina's fate in Les Diabliques. Horror films hold this moment of crisis until the end, because the slim hope of escaping or outsmarting the situation is what drives the genre. In horror films, there is a clear distinction between what is good and what is evil. Therefore, there is always a chance of defeating the evil in horror films. Horror films give a false hope of survival, whereas noir gives you no hope at all. The key difference between the noir protagonist and the horror protagonist is that only the noir protagonist understands that they are truly doomed.
What is it we are seeking? Diamonds? Rubies? Gold? Perhaps narcotics? How civilized this earth used to be. But as the world becomes more primitive, its treasures become more fabulous. Perhaps sentiment will succeed where greed failed. You will die, Mr. Hammer.
Don't you know what's going on out there? This is no Sunday school picnic.
Don't you understand? My brother is alone!
Your brother is dead.
No! My brother is not dead!
These two clips from Kiss Me Deadly and Night of the Living Dead highlight the difference in perception between the noir world and the horror one. Barbara from Night of the Living Dead falls victim to false hope, whereas Mike Hammer understands the gravity of the situation he is in. Whether it be noir or horror, the moment of existential crisis is what defines this era of films.